The topic of difficulty in video games is a bit of a convoluted one. Some argue that games need to have a challenge, while others believe that every game should have difficulty options. And then there are those who state there should be such a thing as a journalist difficulty for reviewers, which I won't even get into to prevent my anger and disgust at such a notion. But I digress. In some cases, difficulty in video games comes with the world that the player is situated in, to give it a feel and atmosphere of what it is attempting to portray, while others are difficult as it is what makes the gameplay engaging. The game we're looking at today takes the former approach to difficulty, creating a feeling that the whole world is truly turning against you. Ritual Crown of Horns is a fast-paced top-down shooter with base defense elements. It is developed by indie developer Draw Distance and published by Feardemic. It released on Steam November 7, 2019 for PC and is priced at €19.99. While Ritual may be in need of some quality of life improvements in certain areas, its fast-paced, action-packed and strategic gameplay mixed with a metal soundtrack and varied weapons and abilities create a difficult yet fun and engaging take on the Wild West. In Ritual, you take on the role of Daniel Goodchild, a former army officer, bounty hunter and frontier legend. There is no other gunslinger that equals him. He is sent on a mission to stop a witch from bringing the country into chaos, but upon reaching the cabin where the witch is situated, he is attacked and murdered by a mysterious group of people. Barely alive and his body mangled beyond normal means of repair, Goodchild is confronted by the witch he was sent to kill. It is here that she brings him back to life, but at the cost that he is bound to her and must help her in her mission. Her mission? To stop a cult known as the Crown of Horns, the very ones that killed Goodchild. If the witch dies, Goodchild dies with her. What is the cult's agenda? Why is the witch so hell-bent on defeating them? Why was Goodchild killed? The answers to your questions will slowly but surely become answered throughout your quest. The plot to Ritual is pretty good. It has a different spin on what you'd expect of a story that involves a cult. It isn't a story about them attempting to summon a powerful evil demon or anything like that. Instead, it is about control of a country, and is quite effective even if at times the writing is a bit hit and miss. Throughout your journey you will ally yourself with the Trickstress, a mysterious woman capable of moving through alternate dimensions to predict the future, and the god of guns, a gifted weaponsmith capable of making any weapon possible with a blueprint. The characters are each unique and have their own personality, purpose and history behind them, including Goodchild himself. As you progress, you begin to learn more about each of the characters through dialogue, and in Goodchild's case through journal entries, giving you the history and role of them all. The writing and the characters are not a case of being a masterpiece, but they certainly do the job, creating engagement and intrigue throughout. The characters too bounce off each other reasonably well, with them often questioning each other or even outright annoying or teasing one another. It is unfortunate, however, that the God of Guns doesn't get nearly as much dialogue like that of the others, but regardless, character design works. There's no mistake, and the plot plays second to the gameplay in Ritual. Nevertheless, for those who are looking for a decent story in amongst all the carnage, there is an interesting one to be found here. In Ritual, your goal is to travel the country defeating the cultist that is situated at various locations throughout the map. The map is broken up into 3 different directions, which are east, west and north. The map is accessed through the carriage in the hub world. The player is free to move between these 3 different paths as they see fit. So if one starts to get too difficult, they can begin tackling one of the others and come back later on. Each of the levels has their own unlockables associated with them, which are granted to the player upon completing them. These include unlocking new weapons, new spells and equipable items. Upon unlocking spells and weapons, they are available to use and equip as you see fit, but equipment items must be first purchased from the Trickstress before being possible to use. You can buy items using cult horns, which are given for completing each level and completing challenges. We'll get to the challenges in more depth shortly. The constant unlocking of new items and abilities presents a consistent sense of progression throughout the game, giving you more and more power the further you progress, allowing you to take on the more difficult levels that you may have struggled with at the earlier points. And the ability to move freely between all 3 directions results in you never getting stuck on one particular level, which is fantastic for such a difficult game. The downfall, however, is that because of this free movement and how difficult each path gets towards their end, you'll be moving back and forth between them regularly. This results in you completing each path very close to each other, which lessens the dialogue that occurs upon finishing them due to it having little consistency. The most interesting parts of the plot are all revealed at near the same time, feeling like one chapter as opposed to 3 separate ones, you could say. And it leaves the early and mid stages of the game without much in the way of progressive storytelling or revealing of the antagonist until near the end. It is a minor issue but can be quite jarring. Each of the paths on the map contain different environments. The west is a desert, the north has woodland and ice, and the east has towns and factories. The different paths having such environments presents a regular change, giving a breath of fresh air throughout, with none of them outstaying their welcome. Despite the gameplay being quite samey throughout, the environments really help keep things flowing, where you never feel you're doing the same thing over and over again. It is very well designed. In each level your objective is to defend the witch while she performs a ritual that will obliterate all the members of the cult that are in that particular area. On occasion you will have a level that doesn't involve the witch and instead revolves around good child surviving on his own until the timer runs out. This can take anything from 2.5 minutes to 5 minutes depending on the level. At the start of a level only a handful of enemies will come into the map, but as it progresses the number of enemies quickly begins to increase and continues the closer the time gets to reaching 0. To help you in defending the witch, most levels have barricades of some kind set up preventing enemies temporarily from getting through, but it doesn't take long for them to break down the barricades if you leave them undefended for a period of time. This is all the while having executioner units focusing on you as opposed to the barricades like normal units would. So not only do you have to defend the blockades and the witch, but you also need to protect yourself too. Very often the start of a level revolves around killing enemies that are smashing down the barricades, but sooner or later the enemies will begin to get through as the level goes on. By the time the counter starts to reach its end, the only line of defense left between the enemies and the witch are you and your weapons and spells. That is, if you have done well enough that you're not already overwhelmed, of course. There are a number of things that you can use to help you on your quest. The first is the dash, which allows you to make a quick dash in any direction, allowing you to keep a distance between enemies and yourself. It requires the consumption of a soul in order to use. As you kill enemies, Good Child automatically absorbs their souls, which is then used to dash and cast spells. Each spell requires either 10 or 15 souls in order to cast. The more effective you are at killing enemies, the more souls you obtain, allowing for more spells to be cast. If you absorb enough souls within a short duration, a pentagram will appear at your feet, making you temporarily invulnerable, and when dashing you deal massive damage to any enemy you ram into at the same time, giving an additional layer of strategy to the otherwise fast-paced and chaotic gameplay. Along with the spells and the dash ability throughout the levels, power-ups will spawn in to help you, which are shown as glowing orbs of different colours consisting of red, blue, turquoise and yellow. Red restores some of your health, blue increases the soul multiplier, giving additional souls for every single soul. Turquoise greatly increases your movement speed, and yellow greatly increases your reload speed. Having all of these useful little additions really help with balancing things out, giving you additional methods to defend yourself and the witch with, all the while adding a new layer of depth to the gameplay. Do you cast a spell or save the souls for dashing? Do you pick up the power up now or save it until a bit later? They're all things that need to be considered and decided on in a second notice due to the breakneck pacing of the game, making it a very intense experience. But even with these small advantages, they won't stop you from becoming overwhelmed by the enemy ranks. This is where the difficulty of Ritual really starts to show itself. The sheer number of enemies that start to spawn in is simply astonishing. It gets to the point where you can't hold them back just by gunning them down alone, and some strategy and tactics are essential in order to survive. And the further you progress in the game, tougher and more powerful enemies begin to emerge who are very effective at breaking down barricades. Having the game designed like this makes it quite the uphill battle. Never throughout the whole game are you at an advantage or a point where you're overpowered. Each level and battle have you at the disadvantage, and it is up to your ability to manage blockades and use your equipment effectively, along with some targeting management, to get you through. Such difficulty can be seen as bad or unbalanced gameplay, and in a lot of cases that would be true. But with Ritual, that is not so. When you think about it, Ritual is about taking on over half the population of the American Wild West. The overwhelming number of enemies and the fact that you can hold them off on your own gives a real sense of vastness and sheer power you're fighting against. You really do feel that the whole world is against you, and that is exactly what the developer wanted you to feel. Does it make the game extremely challenging? Yes, of course it does, and overly so for a lot of gamers. But Ritual and its world would lose its sense of being and purpose without it, and it just wouldn't be the same game. In many ways, it is what makes it so special and most of all different from other top-down shooters. Many may not appreciate it for what it is, but I certainly do. However, with that said, the difficulty of Ritual does take one step too far in one regard, and that is with the bosses. When facing off against a boss, you have 5 minutes to defeat them, including the final boss of the game. When you're dealing with bosses and an endless supply of their cronies, 5 minutes ticks away very quickly. If you don't kill the boss in that time frame, you die. Unlike with the general difficulty of the game, having the clock serves no world building purpose or any real reason for having it other than the challenge. The game is already difficult enough, as are the boss encounters themselves, without the clock, so I do feel that it is a bit much in that regard. Other than that, however, the difficulty in Ritual is justifiable. As you progress throughout the game, the levels begin to add in new elements that change up the gameplay, such as totems which distract enemies, causing them to focus on them as opposed to the witch until destroyed. In some levels, fire will fall from the sky, damaging both you and enemies if caught in it. In some instances, a number of dimensions will cross one another, causing the witch to move from one location to another, resulting in you needing to change your focus on where to defend. Such elements add to to the overall difficulty the levels are present in, but they also give them a breath of fresh air, and when mixed with varying environments, results in no two levels ever being the same. While challenging to the highest degree, the general gameplay of Ritual is nevertheless well designed and completely different from that of any other top-down shooter out there. The sheer amount of depth to each level in the game may not at first be apparent, but it is admirable. The sheer attention to detail needed for such design to work is incredible, and has been pulled off very well. It is a form of gameplay that won't be to everyone's taste, but enjoy a challenge and go into it with an open mind and appreciation for what it is, and you'll find yourself enjoying the game immensely. There are a few bugs currently in the game, but nothing too major. One is where if you have a power-up active when the game pauses to show you a particular event, the power-up counter will continue to decrease, causing it to be wasted. Another odd one that I found purely accidentally is that again when the game is paused to show you an event, if you press the escape key to enter the menu and then resume play, all active enemies on the map will become disabled, unable to move and attack, though any new enemies that spawn in afterwards will act as normal, and it is only in that particular instance that it happens, which are few and far between. It could be seen as more of a cheat than a bug in many regards. It is one that works in the player's favour, but nevertheless it is a bug. Other than those two bugs, however, the game works perfectly fine, providing an intense and exhilarating experience that few top-down shooters can equal to. There is a total of 8 weapons and 8 spells in Ritual. Each of the spells and weapons has its own strengths and weaknesses. You can only use up to 3 of each at any one time. For spells you have the likes of Saw Blades, which damages any enemies that come in contact with them and make you invulnerable for its duration. It works wonders for mowing down large groups of weaker enemies, but if you're not careful it is easy to become overwhelmed upon it running out. Or Death Charges, where you have floating explosive orbs that follow you and attack enemies, but you have no control as to what enemies they attack, resulting in you wasting them if not tactical about it. For the weapons you have the likes of the sawn-off shotgun, a very powerful weapon that deals a lot of damage, but with only 2 rounds and an average reload speed, you will be reloading often before being able to use it again, though you can just switch weapons while the reloading weapon still continues to reload automatically. Or the crossbow that has a single shot before reloading, and it can pierce through enemies, allowing for multiple kills and destroying enemy shields. Each of the weapons and spells has particular equipable items associated with them, that when unlocked and equipped enhance their capabilities, such as wider spread, lower recoil and faster rate of fire, or additional rounds for the weapon. For spells it can increase the damage they deal or the number of enemies a spell will affect. Having the weapons and spells work this way results in needing to sum up the situation with each level and equip yourself with the loadout that is going to be most effective. The weapons and spells that work in one level may not work so well in another, adding a level of strategy and tactics to the game, giving it more depth. The more you experiment with them, the more effective loadout combos you learn, and there's quite a few of them. Then there are the previously mentioned challenges. Upon completing a level you'll be able to replay through the Trickstress in order to complete the challenges to earn additional horns for purchasing equipable items. Each level has 3 challenges that can be completed, each one earning 10 horns. Challenges include finishing a level with full health, completing a level using only a specific weapon, a level ending where the witch takes no damage, or killing a number of enemies with one shot from a particular weapon, just to name a few. The challenges are a great addition that allow you to put everything you've learned and your skills to the utmost test, all the while giving plenty of replayability to the levels. In most cases the challenges are very doable, but a few of them are extremely hard to complete. An example of this is the crossbow challenge at the cemetery, where you need to kill 4 enemies with one bolt 10 times. Due to the extremely fast pacing of that level and constant run and gun nature of it, getting a second to line up a shot to kill 4 enemies is a rare occurrence, making it one of the most difficult challenges in the whole game. With that said, however, the challenges are not mandatory to complete Ritual. I still managed to finish the game with only having completed a dozen or so of them, so they are more optional than anything else, but do give you access to a wider range of equipable items, giving you more options with loadouts. The one issue I would have that not only affects the challenges but the general gameplay is the inability to change your weapons and spells without having to return to the hub. This means that every time you want to change your loadout you need to exit the level, go back to the hub, change your equipment and then go back to the level again, having to deal with 2 loading screens in the process. For a game that has such a focus on experimenting with equipment, having the changing of equipment work this way is very unintuitive, not to mention quite frustrating. I could see it putting off a lot of players from continuing to play, especially with just how difficult the game is. Despite that issue, however, as a whole the challenges are enjoyable and present you with exactly that of what the name implies. As a whole, the gameplay to Ritual is great. It certainly won't be everyone's cup of tea due to its challenge and the need for both reflexes and strategy at the same time. But look past that and you'll find a top-down shooter with a ton of depth and charm that exceeds that of what the genre is generally known for. It isn't perfect. There are a few problems like bugs I mentioned and the inability to change your loadout without having to go back through multiple loading screens, and of course bosses having a time limit on them. Those issues aside, however, Ritual is nothing short of an adrenaline-filled metal slaughterfest that will keep you satisfyingly gunning down cultists from beginning to end. The atmosphere to Ritual is fantastic. There's a mysterious, dark, ominous sense to the game where you always feel there's someone watching you, giving it a slight sense of horror with a music track that has notes that fit in perfectly with that. And then there are the moments during the gameplay where things are just pure anarchy, with fast-paced action and heavy metal soundtrack to go with it that just intensifies the combat tenfold. At its heart, the atmosphere to Ritual is one of darkness filled with action and heavy metal, but always looming in the background when things do slow down is that subtle sense of horror that results in you never feeling safe even when in the one place you're supposed to feel it. I did find the main theme that plays during dialogue can get a bit ear piercing at its height of higher musical notes and high bass, which is unfortunate, but other than that the soundtrack and atmosphere to Ritual are nothing short of excellence. Ritual Crown of Horns is one of those little hidden yet flawed indie gems that you happen to come across every once in a blue moon. I feel that sadly it's going to be one of those that will largely remain unnoticed and unappreciated in the vast sea of indie titles, and it is a game that deserves so much more than that. Ritual isn't perfect, it has its issues, but those aside, it is a top-down shooter that possesses an unusual amount of depth and charm for a genre that is generally nothing more than lots of guns, lots of enemies, and mindless shooting. That alone separates it from the others of its kind. It brings a level of sophistication to the genre while also keeping the savagery of its combat that is already so loved. Ritual is a game that is brutal, metal, and unrelenting in every regard, and it makes for one of the most exhilarating and adrenaline-filled games I've played in a very long time, all the while not losing its charm, personality, and depth at the same time. And with that, I give Ritual Crown of Horns an 8 out of 10. The argument of whether games need difficulty settings or should or shouldn't be purposely difficult is a pointless one. Every game is different, and every game benefits or detriments from its level of difficulty in varying ways. Difficulty in video games in their entirety cannot be judged on such a narrow mindset, as the argument has been for a long time now. Some games benefit from easier gameplay, while others need more of a challenge to bring the world and experience together as it's supposed to be. And Ritual Crown of Horns is a perfect example where the difficulty is key to bringing its world and the experience it provides to full fruition. If you're interested in the game and are considering buying it, you can support the channel by purchasing the game through the link in the video description below. For each purchase made through the link, I receive a small commission based on the game's price. Thank you very much to those who may support the channel.